The 1st Battalion of the Bedfordshire Regiment was a regular army battalion which traced its origins all the way back to 1688, when the original regiment was formed by Archibald Douglas. So by the time of the Great War, it already had over 220 years of faithful service behind it. The 1st Bedfordshires fought within the 15th Infantry Brigade, 5th Infantry Division throughout the war, apart from a few weeks between the 3rd of March and 7th of April 1915, which they spent attached to the 28th Division. The 15th Infantry Brigade was comprised the 1st Battalion of the Bedfordshire Regiment, 1st Battalion of the Norfolk Regiment, 1st Battalion of the Cheshire Regiment, the 1st Battalion of the Dorsetshire Regiment between August 1914 and December 1915, when they were replaced by the 16th Battalion of the Royal Warwickshire Regiment, who were themselves in the brigade between December 1915 and October 1918. The 1st 6th Battalion of the Cheshire Regiment was also present between December 1914 and March 1915, and the 1st 6th Battalion of the King's Liverpool Regiment joined in February 1915 and left that November. When the British Empire joined the Great War in August 1914, the battalion was stationed in Ireland and landed in France on the 16th of August 1914 as part of General Douglas Haig's II Corps. They formed a part of the very first wave of the original British Expeditionary Force, nicknamed the Old Contemptibles, and fought in every battle on the Western Front, serving in every sector from Ypres in the north down to the Somme in the south. The battalion were engaged at the Battle of Mons in August 1914 and fought during II Corps' last stand at the Cateau, where 5 Victoria Crosses were won by their division. After the battles of the Marne and the Aisne, they were rushed north to Flanders and were also involved in the battles of La Bassée, followed by the First Battle of Ypres. By the end of November 1914, when the fighting really died down, the division had suffered some 5,000 casualties and remained in a purely defensive role that winter. Having moved to the Ypres salient early in 1915, the division were engaged at the Second Battle of Ypres. The 1st Bedfordshires was specifically involved in capturing then defending Hill 60 against an unending onslaught that saw them suffer enormous casualties. Early in May 1915, the 1st Battalion's Private Edward Warner, known as Ted, won the Victoria Cross defending Hill 60 during the Germans' very early use of gas as an offensive weapon, but was awarded the honour posthumously as he died from the effects of gas poisoning the following day. After spells holding new portions of the Western Front taken over from the French on the Somme and at Arras, the battalion were heavily engaged again, this time during the Battle of the Somme 1916, namely during the attacks on High Wood between the 20th and 25th of July, at Longueval from the 27th to the 30th of July, the Battle of Guillemot, specifically the capture of Pfaffemont or Pfaffemont Farm between the 3rd and 6th of September, and finally the Battle of Morval on the 25th of September. 1917 saw no let-up, and once again the battalion took heavy losses, this time during the Battle of Arras and the 3rd Battle of Ypres, before moving to the Italian front in December 1917. Their division was rushed back to France in April 1918 in response to the German spring offensives, and held the Nieppe forest over the spring and summer until the Allies launched their 100 days offensives that August. During the last very intense months of the war, they took more heavy losses in the Battle of Albert and the pursuit to the Hindenburg Line in August 1918, the Battle of the Canal du Nord in September, the Battle of the Selle in October, and the Battle of the Sambre in November, which saw the few surviving Old Contemptibles who could remember crossing the very road they had taken as the British Army retreated back to Paris after the Battle of Le Cateau in August 1914. On the last day the battalion came under hostile fire, Sergeant 10052 George Neal from Watford, a 1st Battalion pre-war regular since 1912, was fatally wounded and died at the dressing station in Fontaine-aux-Bois. At the end of the hostilities in November 1918, the battalion moved into their role as an occupying force in Belgium, before being returned home and continuing with their garrison posting in Ireland. The men of the 1st Battalion served within one of the British Army's consistently reliable regular divisions throughout the war, earning hundreds of gallantry medals including Ted Warner's Victoria Cross, but around 1,840 officers and men died while serving in the battalion.